As long as they've existed, there has been a never-ending discourse around the dangers of video games. The argument has frequently been made that video games, particularly violent ones, have a negative effect on one's mental health. All sorts of games have been labeled as dangerous, from Mortal Kombat, to Night Trap, to Mario Party. Listen, people say Grand Theft Auto promotes aggression, but that's nothing compared to the rage I feel when Mario Party inevitably cheats me out of my win. But whereas those games have been accused of harming people mentally, what if I told you of a game that harmed people physically? A game that was so dangerous it had to be destroyed. What manner of evil contraption can cause such misery with reckless abandon? Kneel before whatever god you believe in and pray for mercy, as we gaze into the abyss of the world's most dangerous video game.
He is greater than anybody else. The man came to save our planet. That's the Sonic Blast Man.
I can still remember the first time I saw Sonic Blast Man. Like so many 90s kids, nothing was better than a trip to the local arcade. Our local spot was named Starland, and as far as I was concerned, it was the raddest place on earth. It had go-karts, bumper boats, that weird tank game I never once saw anyone playing. But its main attraction was the massive arcade. It was in that arcade that my parents and I first laid eyes on Sonic Blast Man. In the game, you are the titular Sonic Blast Man, and it's your job to save people by defeating enemies of increasing difficulty. Only you didn't beat the game with button combinations or impeccable timing, you beat the game by beating the game up. Sonic Blast Man was made by a company called Taito. Taito is probably best known at that point for creating the games Bubble Bobble, Arkanoid, and especially Space Invaders. Not content with creating regular arcade cabinets, Taito wanted to create something different. To do so, they created a unique game that harkened back to the days of those old test your strength with a mallet carnival games. The mechanics behind Sonic Blast Man are fairly simple. Players would put on a boxing glove and hit a padded cushion as hard as they could. The game would measure the PSI of the hit and subtract it from your enemy's health. You got 3 punches, and if your cumulative PSI was enough, you beat the level. The website imockery.com compared the game to that scene of Rocky IV where Ivan Drago is demonstrating his punching power, and you have no idea how genuinely upset I was that they made that connection before I could. While the trips to Starland were originally meant for me, it quickly became apparent that this game had an effect on my father, who became determined to beat it. I have such vivid memories of my dad waiting with a bunch of other dads, determined that this time he was going to kick the game's ass. The game had 5 stages with increasing difficulty. The harder the enemy, the more it was going to take to knock them out. In the first stage, you must stop a woman from being mugged by what is essentially one of the bad guys from Death Wish 3. Then you must stop a truck from running over a baby. Never mind that Sonic Blast Man is presumably killing an innocent driver, or that he could just fly and grab the baby.
You're boring everybody! Quit boring everyone!
In level 3, you have to destroy a skyscraper, which is apparently managed by terrorists. Man, Sonic Blast Man had no sense of collateral damage, did he? Level 4 is pretty cool, as you have to try and knock out a giant robotic crab terrorizing a beach. I do enjoy that it has to be a robot. You know someone pitched that it should be a mutant crab, and they got yelled at by their boss for not taking their job seriously. My dad spent many an afternoon knocking the legs off that crab, but it was always the next and final level that he could never conquer. The last and toughest level in the game is about stopping an asteroid from destroying Earth.
Your call. No pressure.
That level was incredibly difficult to beat, but man oh man did my dad try. I'm sure a good chunk of my college fund was converted to quarters as my father punched hole after hole into that meteor to no avail. Sonic Blast Man related income instability was probably pretty common though, as it was an incredibly popular arcade cabinet. The industry magazine Playmeter frequently had it in its top 10 of most popular games. The game even appeared multiple times on the British video game show Games Master, where they had professional boxers on to demonstrate the gameplay. It really says a lot about the differences between England and America, that England got a dark and gritty video game show like Games Master, and us American kids got the guy from Nick Arcade singing his every thought.
Waiting for this, they told me so. We're gonna play, don't you know? New people coming to visit me. Put up the hut and chop a squat.
You could rightfully say that there were a multitude of reasons for Sonic Blast Man's success. You could say its sense of humor, or its clever game design, but if we're really being honest, the biggest factor to its popularity was probably the male ego. My dad didn't stand in line to play Sonic Blast Man by himself. He stood with a lot of other dads, each with something to prove. If it wasn't dads, then it was teenagers trying to impress each other, or more likely girls they liked, by showing them how hard they can punch. There is nothing a woman finds more arousing than punching a building as hard as you can. By showing people that you could beat the game, it would, to paraphrase a great American, demonstrate that you are oozing machismo. The game was so popular it even got a port to the Super Nintendo, albeit with different game mechanics. It makes sense. I don't think Nintendo was too keen to market a game that encouraged people to destroy their televisions. I mean, not yet. The Wii was still 20 years away.
And what? Oh, jeez. And there goes the tennis racket.
Sonic Blast Man for Super Nintendo was a side-scroller game a la a Final Fight or a Streets of Rage. The Super Nintendo version did have the arcade levels, but they were bonus stages and were more about timing instead of brute force. The consensus seems to be that the game wasn't that great, although it does have its fans. The sequel, cleverly called Sonic Blast Man 2, is the game people seem to prefer and received a far better critical reception. So now I have to do that annoying YouTuber thing where I ask a rhetorical question I already know the answer to, but pretend like I don't. So if this game was so popular, how come you never see him anywhere?
Well, we're waiting.
I had mentioned that so much of the popularity of the game came from the dude's rock vibes that surrounded the cabinet, that was also likely its downfall. I don't know if you know this, but sometimes guys can be very stupid, especially when it comes to safety regulations. The game insisted you wear a boxing glove and stay stationary while punching, but a lot of people took that as merely a suggestion. Instead, they would barehand the machine or get a running start. They figured the cushion would protect them, which was true, but they didn't consider that behind that cushion was a metal rod. As you might imagine, after testosterone-induced wear and tear, the cushion would become damaged, leaving that rod exposed. This led to a rash of injuries. Every article I found during my research that mentions having played Sonic Blast Man would inevitably mention one of the author's friends injuring themselves. I read about sprained wrists, cut fingers, and most importantly, broken hands. I say most importantly because a broken hand is what Wisconsin teenager Chad Thayer claimed to have suffered when he sued Taito in 1994 on the grounds that Sonic Blast Man was an unreasonably dangerous game. As far as I can tell, that was the only injury to get mainstream media attention, but it was far from the only injury Sonic Blast Man would cause. According to the US Consumer Product Safety Commission, there were at least 70 Sonic Blast Man injuries that Taito is made aware of. That's not including the likely hundreds or maybe even thousands of injuries that Taito wasn't informed of. As of this video, Sonic Blast Man currently holds the Guinness World Record for most real-life injuries for players of a beat-em-up video game. A record that will likely stand unless Mario Party ever makes it to the arcade. Stop the steal, Toadette! The commission investigated Taito and felt that they had not done enough to prevent those injuries. As a result, Taito was fined $50,000. In March of 1995, Taito saw the writing on the wall and decided to cut bait as they voluntarily ordered a recall of all Sonic Blast Mans in the United States. There are unverified reports that not only were they to be taken out of arcades, but that they were to be destroyed. The franchise continued on in Europe and Asia, and Taito released a couple sequels, first with a game called Real Puncher, and then with Sonic Blast Heroes. As you can see from this video, old Sonic Blast Mans are still floating out there in the wild, just not in America. They are incredibly rare in the United States, and even the most hardcore arcade collectors have difficulty finding it. Between the destruction of the old cabinets and the general wear and tear of a video game that encouraged players to commit acts of violence upon itself, finding one in good working condition is nearly impossible. Despite its status as the world's most dangerous game, those that experienced it have fond memories of it. Seeing that giant arcade cabinet immediately unlocks a memory for anyone who experienced it. Maybe it's from watching your father get unnecessarily frustrated he couldn't punch an asteroid to death. Maybe it's from thinking that the best way to make sure your crush notices you is to save this baby from that truck. Or maybe, just maybe, it's because you broke your wrist because wearing a boxing glove was for sissies. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you liked it. If you did, please consider subscribing. And also, leave in the comments below any of your Sonic Blast Man related memories. I have to know, did you break your hand? And if you didn't wear a boxing glove, why not?